Everyone, myself Falguni. Welcome to our channel. In previous parts, we have seen that in anime that how Sadao and his wife Hena decided to help an American soldier and how they both try to convince their servants about it, but finally with their own willingness they decided to save it, and Sadao operated him. Now let's see what happened next. This man will live in spite of all, he said to Hannah and San. The young man woke so weak, his blue eyes so terrified when he perceived where he was, that Hannah felt compelled to apologize. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. Now, when both decided to save that man, that time the servants were not ready to help them, because they thought that they were Japanese and that person from America, and both countries had wartime, so they are not ready to help him. And when that Sadao operated him, and after some time that man felt little bit in consciousness, and he tried to recognize the place where he was. That time the conversation happened between the both Sadao and that American, and let's see what was it. Compel यानी कि force, and apologize यानी कि feel sorry. So Sadao took a deep breath as he told Hannah that the injured man would leave, and he woke up, यानी कि that man. His blue-colored eyes were full of fright as he realized where he was, and Hannah felt sorry for him. Definitely he was in danger and thought that I am in tension, because he was with the Japanese family. But Hannah also served him food, as the servants refused to enter the room where he was kept, because for servants it's like a terrible thing against their country. When she came first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. How come you speak English? He gasped. I was a long time in America, she replied. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not, and so she knelt and fed him gently from the porcelain spoon. He ate unwillingly, but still he ate. Now that when Hannah come first time in that room, she saw that he someone he gather all the strength and prepare some for some fearful thing, because both side right now the enemies are there. So when Hannah met the injured man for the first time, she saw the man was gathering strength and he was full of fear. Here we see that the word is gasp. This one, it means to catch one's breath due to astonishment, surprise. दोनों surprise है. हैना एंड सदा को तो पता है कि वो जो इंसान है वो अमेरिकन है, बट अमेरिकन जब कॉन्शियसनेस फील करता है, दैट टाइम ही रियलाइज दैट ही वॉज with enemies. Nell Tenney sat on her knees, that her accent, that lady's accent, Hannah's accent. Porcelain यानी कि विद्या, a white vitrified ceramic, also called china, used for making utensils and pottery etc. जो स्पून है उस टाइप की है. Hannah said softly to the injured man that he should not be afraid, and he was astonished that she could speak English. Definitely it's a like surprising thing. Hannah replied that she had lived in America for a long time, and the man wanted to speak further, but he couldn't, and even he ate unwillingly, but he ate. Why? Because to survive he had to. Now you will soon be strong, she said, now liking him and yet moved to comfort him. He did not answer. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found that young man sitting up and his face bloodless with the effort. Lie down. Sadao cried, do you want to die? So when that Sadao entered in that room, third day after that operation, he found that that man sitting up and his face ब्लडलेस विद दी एफर्ट, जो वो एफर्ट डाल रहा है बैठने के लिए उसका जो फेस है बहुत बुरी तरह से बुरा ब्लडलेस दिख रहा है. देन he forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing, he scolded. He यानी कि सदाव. What are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. He looked just now barely 17. Are you going to hand me over? For a moment, Sadav did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you, he said. I ought of course to give you the police, or you are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me about your name unless I ask it. So here Sadav जो है वो जब वहाँ पे एंटर करता है तो क्या होता है कि Sadav visited the man on the third day after the operation and the young man was sitting but his face was pale and weak due to the effort that he made while sitting. And Sadav screamed at him and ordered him to lie down. He said that the man would die if he stretched himself. Sadav forced him down and inspected the wound that he had operated upon. He scolded the man that he could die if he tried to exert himself. The boy asked Sadav about that what would he do with him now. It seemed that the boy was hardly 17 years old and he asked Sadav that would he hand him over to the Japanese army. And Sadav did not reply instantly from the questions asked by that person. He completed first of his examining the boy and then put the silk quilt on him. Sadav said that he himself did not know what he should do with the boy. Even Sadav added that he was supposed to hand him over to the police, or he also disclosed that he knew that the boy was a prisoner of war. Sadav saw that the boy was about to speak something, but Sadav said not to speak anything to him, and he said that not to speak even your name also unless he asked him to do so. They looked at each other for a moment and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadav. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Sadav, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore, she said. She tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. They think we like Americans. It is not true, Sadav said harshly. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to let the man die if I can help it. The servants cannot understand that, she said anxiously. So here there is a conversation between Sadav and his wife Hannah. No, he agreed. Who? He यानी कि Sadav. So let's see what is the exact conversation between them. Sadav and the boy exchange a glance and then the boy closed his eyes, turned his face towards the wall, and he said okay in a low voice as he felt bitter by Sadav's words. Outside the door, Hannah was sitting for Sadav and he saw that she was in some sort of trouble. Hannah said to Sadao that Yumi yani ki that female servant of the house told that the servants would not stay with them if the American man lived there any longer. Even servants thought that Sadao and Hannah liked that American man because for a long time, they stayed in America and they can't forget even their country's priority. Sadao reacted harshly and said that this was not true, but as a doctor, he had been taught that he has to save any person, even their enemies, if he could help them. Hannah said that the servants could not understand Sadao's predicament. Sadao agreed with this. Neither seemed able to say more, and somehow the household dragged on. The servants grew more watchful. Their courtesy was as careful as even, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired. Now both of them had nothing more to say. Yani ki Sadao and his wife Hannah. The chorus of the house continued, but the servants were vigilant. They were polite but unfriendly towards their master. Even they were hired by Sadao and Hannah, but still their behavior now changed because they thought that their masters weren't doing good thing. Because the both, yani ki Hannah and Sadao, said that American men, and as an enemy they shouldn't do according to servants. It is clear that our master ought to do, the old gardener said one morning. He had worked with flowers all his life and had been a specialist too in moss. For Sadao's father, he made one of the finest moss gardens in Japan, sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle marred the velvet of its surface. My old master's son knew very well what he ought to do, he now said, pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? My young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life, the cook said contemptuously. She spilled a fowl's neck skillfully and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into roots of wisteria vine. Blood is the best of fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. It is the children of whom we must think, Yumi said sadly. What will be their fate if their father is condemned as a traitor? Now moss yani ki a very small soft green plant, and pine needle yani ki very thin sharp leaves that grow on pine trees. Mad yani ki spoiled. So one morning there is a discussion between that servants, and the old gardener said that it was obvious what their master should have done, and the old gardener had worked with flowers all his life and specialized in moss yani ki, as I told you, that very small soft green plant. He had been employed by the Sadao's father, and the gardener had made one of the best moss garden in Japan for Sadao's father, and he would sweep the bright green color carpet of the moss clean so that the sharp leaves of pine tree could not spoil the soft velvety surface. And the gardener plucked a flower bud from the bush as he said that his master's son, for example like Sadao, knew very well what he was supposed to do, and even he added that when the man was almost dead, he should have left him to bleed to death. And then the next servant added this conversation, and here the word is contemptuously yani ki disrespectfully, and wisteria vine, as he mentioned the name of vine here, a flowering plant used for decoration. So the cook said disrespectfully to the gardener that their master was so proud of his skill at saving lives that he did not bother whose life he was saving. She cut the neck of a hen skillfully and held the bird as it shivered. She let the blood of hen flow into the wisteria plant, and the old gardener had instructed her that blood was the best fertilizer for the plants, and he did not allow her to waste a single drop of it. Traitor यानी कि a person who betray his country. Here this one said by the Yumi, as she also added her points in that conversation. They did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hannah as she stood arranging the daisy flowers in the veranda nearby, and she knew they spoke on purpose that she might hear. That they were right she knew too in most of her being, but there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not a sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when he had said in the impulsive way, "Anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom." You hear that Hannah remember the conversation. So the Hannah and the prisoner. She had only bowed her little distant bow. She saw hurt in her eyes, but she did not wish to assuage it. Indeed, he was a great trouble in his house. Now, Yumi was worried about the fate of Sadao and Hannah's children, because if something wrong happened, then definitely children also suffer. Impulsive यानी कि sudden or thoughtless, and assuage यानी कि decrease or reduce. Here you can see the word. As Hannah stood in the veranda at the same time arranging the flowers, the servants discussed the matter in her presence. Even the servants wanted that their master must be listen their conversation. And Hannah also some feeling for the injured man, which she could not, which she could also not analyze, but she did not like the prisoner. Neither she was attracted towards him. The day before the injured man told her that his name was Tom, Hannah did not like him at that moment also. But she had reacted by bowing her head mildly, and she saw that her reaction hurt the injured man. But even in the beginning of the para, the mentioning of the age of that boy was around 17 years, and she did not want to reduce this hurt that she had caused to him, because the injured man was a great trouble for her and her family. His presence was a threat to Hannah and Sadao. Now, as for Sadao, every day he examined the wound carefully. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would in a fortnight be nearly as well as ever. Sadao went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the whole matter. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my house. So far, he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. On the 7th day after that, two things happened. In the morning, the servants left to gather their belongings tied in large square cotton kerchief. When Hannah got up in the morning, nothing was done, the house not clean and the food not prepared. She knew what it meant. She was dismayed and even terrified, but her pride as a mistress would not allow her show it. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully. When they appeared before her in the kitchen, she paid them off and thanked them for all that they had done for her. They were crying, but she did not cry. The cook and the gardener had served Sadao since he was a little boy in father's house, and Yumi cried because of the children. She was so grieving that after she had gone, she ran back to Hannah. So now in first para here, first of all we discuss that Sadao was performing his role perfectly, and he could examine the wound every day. The morning the last stitches were removed from the injured man's body, and he would be as well as even in the next 15 days, fortnight yani ki that's 16 days 15 days. In the meanwhile, Sadao went to his office and wrote a letter to the chief of police to report the entire matter to him. Sadao started his report and he wrote that how he got that man and how he saved him, all the things he tried to write in that letter. Sadao had just typed this much of the report, and he opened the drawer of his desk and kept this unfinished report in it. While in the second para, we can see that in next para, in this one, on the 17th day, after that, two things happened. That the servants of the house left in the morning, and they had tied their belongings in huge piece of cloth. Here the word we can see that kerchiefs, it means a square piece of cloth. And when Hannah got up in the morning, she saw that the work had not been done. The house was completely dirty, and the food had not been cooked. She realized that the servants were up to something. She was dismayed. Dismayed yani ki, here the word, shocked. She was shocked by the work done by servants, and horrified when she came to know that the servants were leaving. Hannah did not show her feeling to the servants. Instead, she remained calm and maintained her grace as a lady of the house. Here there is a word mistress. Mistress yani ki a woman in a position of authority or control. So she remained as much as cool and calm. She paid the servants and thanked them for their service, and also paid their money. The cook and the gardener were very old employees. Even they were working with them when Sadao was a young boy. And Yumi was crying because she would miss the children. She had attachment with the children of Sadao and Hannah. She was so sad that she ran up to Hannah after she had left. If the baby misses me too much tonight, send for me. I am going to my own house, and you know where it is. Thank you, Hannah said, smiling, but she told herself she would not send for Yumi. However, the baby cried. She made the breakfast, and Sadao helped with the children. Neither of them spoke up the servants beyond the fact that they were gone. But after Hannah had taken morning food to the prisoner, she came back to Sadao. Why is it we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? She asked him. Even the servants see more clearly than we do. Why are we different from other Japanese? So, Yumi was so emotional when she thought about the children. Yumi said to Hannah that if the baby missed her at night, she could call her, and she further added that she was going to her own house, and Hannah knew where her house was. Hannah smiled and thanked for the help they had done, but Hannah knew that she wasn't going to send her baby to Yumi even they cried. Next morning, Hannah prepared the breakfast, and Sadao helped her by looking after the children, because they have to manage children and the kitchen both. Neither of them talked regarding the servants, but after Hannah served the morning food to the prisoner of war, she came back to Sadao, probably to talk something about it. And Hannah was very worried, and she questioned that why they were not very clear about what they ought to do. She added that even the servants were very clear. what they want to do or what not. She said that why they were behaving differently from other Japanese people. Hina wanted to say that as Americans were their enemies, they should not have treated that prisoner of war and they should have let him die just like any other Japanese would have done. Sadao did not answer, but a little later he went into the room where the prisoner was and said brusquely, "Today, you may get up on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow you may try it twice as long. It would be well that you get back your strength as quickly as possible." He saw that flicker of terror on the young face that was still very pale. "Okay," the boy murmured. Even evidently, he was determined to say more. "I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life." Now, after then, Sadao did not answer. But he little later he went into the room where the prisoner was and said brusquely यानी कि quickly, "Today you may get up on your feet and I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time as a practice to get up. Tomorrow you may try twice as long and it would be well that you get back your strength as quickly as possible." He saw यानी कि that जो हमने भाई पैरा रीड किया है पूरा, तो यहाँ पे जो सदाव है did not pay attention towards Hina's words and he went into the room where that prisoner of war was, and he said that that day the man could get up and stand up on his feet and wanted him stand only 5 minutes at a time, and from next day he will practice it twice and get 10 minutes. Sadao also said that it would be good for everyone that the man regain strength as soon as possible. Sadao hinted that they wanted to get rid of American as early as possible. And same time, he यानी कि Sadao saw that the flicker of terror on the face, that young face, and that his face was still very pale and colorless because he was very weak, that prisoner of war. The boy spoke in a low voice and said, "Okay." It appeared that he wanted to speak something more, but he just said that he wanted to thank Sadao for saving his life. "Don't thank me too much, too early," Sadao said coldly. He saw the flicker of terror again in boy's eyes, terror as unmistakable as an animal's. The scars of his neck were crimson for a moment. Those scars, what were they? Sadao did not ask. Crimson यानी कि bright red color. So Sadao was very expressionless when he said that the boy do not need to say thank too early. As he spoke this, he saw that the hint of scare again appeared in boy's eyes. The writer compared the boy's terror eyes to the scared animal. The injury marks on the neck of the boy turned the bright red in a color for a while. Sadao thought that has caused those injury marks, but he did not try to ask anything to that boy. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Hena, working hard on unaccustomed labor, saw a messenger come to the door in an official uniform. Her hands weren't weak and she could not draw her breath. The servants must have told already. She ran to Sadao, gasping, unable to utter a word. But by then the messenger had simply followed her through the garden, and then he stood. She pointed at him helplessly. Sadao looked up from his book He was in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. So, first thing happened, then now it's time to, for the second time, what happened to them? Unaccustomed labor, here you can read this word, it means not used to perform hard work. And gasping, it means struggling to breathe or unable to speak. So now what happened that day? That day, the second incident happened in the afternoon. Hannah was busy with the household work as the servants had left. All of a sudden, she had to perform all the work and she is not ready to do this. She was very tired and she saw that a messenger wearing official uniform had come to the house. As she saw him, her hands went weak. Why? Because she was so terrified and she was unable to breathe. This was because she felt the servants must have told the authority that they were sheltering at enemy. Hannah ran up to Sadao and she was struggling to breathe. She informed all the things to her husband and the messenger also entered in the garden and then stood in front of the Sadao. Hannah was helpless as she pointed her finger towards the messenger. Sadao looked up from his book as he was doing something. And he was sitting in his office which had a partition in it and the part of the office beyond the partition open in the garden and was full of sunshine. What is it? He asked the messenger and then he rose, seeing the man's uniform. You are to come to the palace, the man said. The old general is in pain again. Oh, Hannah breathed. Is that all? All, the messenger exclaimed. Is it not enough? Indeed it is, she replied. I am very sorry. When Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen but doing nothing. The children were asleep and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from work. So, Sadao asked the messenger the matter due to which he had visited them, and when he saw that the messenger was wearing a uniform, he stood up as a mark of respect. The messenger said that Sadao was supposed to accompany him to the palace because he added that the general felt like pain and Sadao was supposed to visit him treated as a doctor. Upon hearing this conversation, suddenly that Hannah relieved and she said, oh. With this, she took a deep breath and he asked that was all which the messenger had come. The messenger reacted and said, all. He could not understand that what else could be for which he was supposed to visit the house. He asked that was not enough that he was here to call doctor due to the pain of the general. Hannah was sorry for her reaction and said that the reason was enough for the messenger to visit them. She did not need any other reason for him to visit. And as soon as Sadao had to accompany the messenger, he went to Hannah to say goodbye. And Hannah was in this time kitchen, but she was not doing anything. The children had gone to sleep and it's Hannah's resting time. But she was more tired due to the scare of seeing the messenger than the household work. Now further, what happened? I thought they had come to arrest you, she said. He gazed down into her anxious eye. I must get rid of this man for your sake, he said in distress. Somehow I must get rid of him. So thou goes to see the general. Of course, the general said weakly. I understand fully. But that is because I once took a degree in Princeton. See, I saw few Japanese have. I care nothing for the man. Excellency, Sadao said, but having operated on him with such success. Yes, the general said, it only makes me feel you more indispensable to me. Evidently, you can save anyone. You are so skilled. You say you think I can stand one more such attacks as I have had today. Not more than one, Sadao said. So now, here, when Sadao visited his wife, Hena said to Sadao that she had thought that the messenger had come to arrest him. Sadao looked carefully at Hena's exercise and he was very sad and distressed. He said that he must get rid of the man for her sake, and he added that he had to get rid of man by any means. Now Sadao also goes to see the general, and here now there is a conversation between general and Sadao. Sadao narrated the entire story to the general, and the general, who was very weak, said that he understood Sadao's position because he had also studied in America at the Princeton University, where only a few Japanese who had studied in America. That here with their conversation, now we can see that general was understand enough to recognize the Sadao's mental condition because he was so disturbed, and what he is indispensable, yani ki necessary. Sadao replied to general that he did not care for the American man, but as he had operated upon him successfully, the general interrupted him and said yes. He felt that Sadao was a necessary part of his life, and the general also felt that Sadao was very skillful, that why he can save anyone. And the general asked that did Sadao think that the general had any chance of surviving another heart attack as the one he had that day. Sadao replied that in his opinion the general could not survive more than one such heart attack. Then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you, the general said with anxiety. His long pale Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. You cannot be arrested, the general said, closing his eyes. Suppose you were condemned to death and the next day I had to have my operation. The general, here there is actually a little bit thing that you can also understand when I explain you. The general said that then in that case he could not allow anything to happen to Sadao, because कौन बचाएगा जनरल को कि कुछ होगा तो Sadao तो skillful doctor है. He wanted, the general wanted to say that he needed Sadao, and so he would protect him. The general's long, weak, yellowish face became expressionless because he wasn't thinking something, and he said that Sadao being arrested, if he thought Sadao being arrested, and said that Sadao could not be arrested only. Further, he added that if Sadao was sentenced to death and he needed an operation the next day, then who would operate upon him, and what was the guarantee that he would be saved? So the general wanted to say that he needed Sadao, and so he would protect him and he would not let anything happen to him. Now there are other surgeons. Excellence, Sadao suggested. None I trust, the general replied. The best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. I do not care for their point of view, he signed. He seems a pity that we cannot better combine the general ruthlessness with the American sentimentality. Then you could turn your prisoner over to accession, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. The general laughed. He had an unconscious sense of humor. As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? He asked. Sadao smiled. I am not quite sure, he said, but for your sake I would be willing to try, Excellency. So, here the word ruthless यानी that harshness and sentimentality, being emotional, accession यानी legal punishment. And so Sadao suggested to the general that there were many other surgeons in Japan who could save them, and the general replied that he did not trust anyone else other than Sadao. He यानी कि general added that the best surgeons had been trained by the German, and for them the operation would be successful even if the general died. He did not care for their point of view, and journal added that the Japanese could not combine the harsh nature of Germans with the emotional nature of Americans. So the journal wanted to say that they did not have any such persons who could combine the harsh nature of a German and the emotional nature of American. He said that if they would have been able to do that, then Sadao could be harsh and could turn the prisoner to the Japanese and at the same time be emotional and not murder the general during the operation. With this, the journal laughed and now learned from America. So here journal was in favor of Sadao. He wanted to protect him because according to journal, only Sadao could help him if any more heart attack come to him. So Sadao also smiled that I'm not quite sure, but he said that for your sake I would be willing to try excellency and to save you. So we will discuss remaining part in next lecture. Till then keep watching our channel. Like us. Thank you.